Sestua KV from the Old French into English means this killed that life. This made all men, women, and children presumed and assumed dead, and a trust set up. According to Black's Law Dictionary, Sestua KV means the person whose life measures the duration of a trust, gift, estate, or insurance contract. The life of a trust is 7 years under the law of limited liability. This act is most diabolically evil because it killed everyone and gave them 7 years to claim back their lives. The fires of 1666 also created the only parcel of land on the planet that does not have a title deed, the Golden Mile, the City of London, which is a corporation having its own flag, its own constitution and laws, its own defense and police forces. The Golden Square Mile holds the Bank of England, the London Metal Exchange, Fleet Street, FTSE Stock Exchange, the Royal Mint, and the Old Bailey Courthouse. The United States channels billions yearly to the Bank of England to pay the Crown's tribute. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was set up, the brainchild of a secret meeting held on Jekyll Island in 1910. As United States Inc.'s debt soared well above the estimated gold reserves the corporation of the U.S. held as a standard for the dollar, the Federal Reserve Act was passed on Christmas Eve while Congress is away, giving the power for a foreign corporate entity to print fiat and collect interest on monies created from thin air. A bank does not loan you money. That's illegal. A bank gives you credit, which is legal, but not necessarily lawful. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was introduced, paving the way for the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. The Bolshevik Revolution broke out in Russia that was funded and began by Wall Street bankers such as Jacob Schiff and J.P. Morgan. That same year, Woodrow Wilson signed in the War Powers Act that basically stated that the U.S. was stopping all trade with the enemy except for those whom are granted a license, which excluded Americans. Licenses began to be issued in 1933. In 1933, the U.S. had reached Section 11 bankruptcy. President Roosevelt amended the War Powers Act of 1917 and declared all U.S. citizens as enemies of the state. There was a declared national emergency on March 9th, with an emergency act being passed placing all power, property, and resources of the U.S. into the hands of the President under martial law that has continued ever since. This is renewed yearly by executive order. The Federal Reserve began to print fiat money. The all-seeing eye was placed on the dollar bill. All men, women, and children born ever since arrive as collateral for U.S. Inc.'s debt, as slaves and enemies of the state. The balance of debt versus collateral is determined through illegal wars for profit, where the debt versus collateral is balanced, or rather the herd of slaves is thinned out. What all this means, ladies and gentlemen, is you are all slaves and cannon fodder for the nations you are in and who are subservient to the rulers running them. You have been turned into collateral for national debts. Consider this when hearing about the imminent collapse of the economy soon to take place. When debts cannot be paid, you are said to be in deep water, and those in deep water usually drown. Shylock, according to Shakespeare, asked for a pound of flesh to pay the bill. The owners of U.S. Inc. demand the same according to Admiralty Maritime statutes you are all under. The sun never did set on the Roman Empire, and Rome is just as alive today as it was a couple thousand years ago. You are all owned property. and subservient to a crown, whether you like it or not. You are all considered dead and unclaimed by the crown who laid claim and made you their bitch. You cannot nor are you allowed to speak for yourself, as dead persons cannot speak, and is why you need a lawyer to speak for you in a court. The dead have no rights. This is all based upon ancient ecclesiastical or canon law at its root and core. When you board a ship called a church, which is also considered a bank under maritime admiralty, and embark upon it, the licensed and registered pastor or priest must teach and keep you obedient to the monarch, the crown. Because he who wears the crown, which is the monarch, is the head of the ship called church. He is the king, the lord and captain of the ship called church, and the pastor or priest is an agent of the crown. Maritime Admiralty, or rather Universal Commercial Code, or UCC, is the matrix pulled over everyone's eyes that governs all, because everything has been made into ships on the sea of corporate commerce. Without their one eye, which is money, which is water, all ships are dead at sea and cannot traverse their fictional matrix they created. It's now high time for a concerted universal mutiny.
We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion.